The Watcher's Game. The sunrise painted Thornhaven in shades of amber and gold, but Cassian barely registered the beauty. He stood at the window of the archive's uppermost chamber, Elena beside him, watching the city stir to life below. His hands still trembled from channeling the void flame, and the dark veins beneath his skin pulsed with a rhythm that matched the corrupted ley lines he could now sense with disturbing clarity. "You should eat something," Elena said quietly, though her green eyes remained fixed on his hands. She'd been staring at them for the past 10 minutes, at the evidence of what he'd become. "I'm not hungry." It was true. Since touching the Anathema-class magic, his body's needs felt distant, muffled. Another warning sign from the texts, the first stage of disconnection from one's physical form. "We should go. The council meeting is at sunset, and I need to. You need to rest." Elena's voice carried an edge he'd rarely heard. "You've been awake for over 30 hours, Cassian. You've studied forbidden texts, cast your first corrupted working, and now you want to what? March into the palace and face the king?" He turned to look at her properly. Exhaustion lined her face too. Dark circles under those green eyes that had watched him all night, waiting outside the archives while he delved into darkness. Her auburn hair was disheveled, and she still wore yesterday's clothes. She'd stayed. Despite everything, she'd stayed. "I need to practice," he said. "If I'm going to use this magic against the Voidweaver, I need to understand it better, control it better. The warded chamber below can wait a few hours." Elena stepped closer, and he caught the scent of her, jasmine and old books. "Please, Cassian, just a few hours. Let me make sure you're still you." The words struck deeper than she probably intended. Still you. How long before that stopped being true? Before he could answer, footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Heavy, measured steps that spoke of authority and purpose. They both froze. "Expecting someone?" Elena whispered. Cassian shook his head. The archives were supposed to be restricted at this hour, sealed until the morning scholars arrived. Only senior magisters had access, and the door opened without a knock. High Inquisitor Mordain stood in the doorway, his black robe seeming to absorb the morning light. His gray eyes swept the chamber, taking in the scattered texts on the reading table, the ritual components Cassian had used for his working, and most damning of all, the faint traces of void flame that still clung to the air like the memory of corruption. "Magister Netherbane," Mordain said, his voice neutral. "Miss Brightwater, I confess I'm not surprised to find you here." Cassian's mind raced. How much did Mordain know? How much had he seen? The Inquisitor's expression revealed nothing, that weathered face carved from stone and duty. "High Inquisitor," Cassian managed. "I was studying the texts that Archmage Verena authorized me to." "I know what Verena authorized." Mordain stepped into the chamber, and Elena instinctively moved closer to Cassian. "I also know what you did here last night. The wards on this chamber are designed to detect Anathema-class workings, Magister. They woke me at midnight." Silence fell like a blade. Cassian felt Elena tense beside him, saw her hand drift toward the focus crystal at her belt. But what could she do? Mordain was one of the kingdom's most powerful mages, trained in both combat and counter-magic. And he was the High Inquisitor, the very person charged with hunting those who practiced forbidden arts. "Then you're here to arrest me," Cassian said quietly. Strange how calm he felt. Perhaps the corruption was already numbing his fear. "Am I?" Mordain moved to the window, gazing out at the city. "Tell me, Magister, what did you feel when you cast your working, when you channeled the void flame?" The question caught Cassian off guard. Power. More than I've ever felt. But also, he hesitated, then decided honesty was his only option. Hunger. The magic wanted more. It wanted to consume. "And did you let it?" "No, I maintained control, barely." Mordain nodded slowly. "The texts would have told you that Anathema-class magic creates a soul bond with the first use, that each subsequent working becomes easier, more tempting. Did you read that part?" "Yes, and yet you cast it anyway." Mordain turned from the window, and for the first time, Cassian saw something in those gray eyes that wasn't quite condemnation. "Why?" Cassian straightened, meeting the Inquisitor's gaze. "Because the Voidweaver is awakening, because our wards are failing, because traditional magic feeds it, and if we don't find another way, the kingdom falls within a fortnight. You know this. You were there in the council chamber when I explained it." "I was." Mordain's voice softened slightly. I was also there when the king forbade any use of forbidden magic, when he made his position absolutely clear. Then why are you here? Elena spoke up suddenly, her voice sharp. If you're going to arrest him, do it, but don't play games. Mordain's lips quirked in what might have been amusement. No games, Miss Brightwater, only clarity. He turned his attention back to Cassian. I am the High Inquisitor of Ardenvale. My duty is to enforce the laws regarding magical practice, particularly those concerning forbidden arts. Do you understand what that means? It means you should be binding me right now, Cassian said. It means, Mordain continued as if he hadn't spoken, that I must act when Anathema-class magic is used within the kingdom's borders, when I witness it, or when evidence of its use is brought before me in an official capacity. He paused, letting the words sink in. However, the wards on this chamber are not monitored by the Royal Guard. They report directly to me, and I have not yet filed a formal report of last night's disturbance. Cassian's breath caught. You're saying... I'm saying nothing. Mordain's voice turned hard. I am telling you the law, Magister. If you were to use forbidden magic in the field, in defense of the kingdom, in combat with Shadowspawn or the Voidweaver itself, I would have no choice but to act. I would be forced to hunt you, to bind you, to bring you before the king for judgment. Do you understand? But if I practice here, Cassian's mind raced ahead. In this warded chamber where only you monitor the alarms, then we exist in a gray area. Mordain moved toward the door. Research, Magister. Academic study of historical practices. That is what Archmage Verena authorized, and that is what the records will show. Should you choose to spend extensive time in these archives, studying these texts, even practicing theoretical applications in a controlled environment, he shrugged. Well, scholars must be thorough. Elena's hand found Cassian's, squeezing hard. The Inquisitor was giving him permission. Tacit, deniable, but permission nonetheless. Why? Cassian asked. Why are you allowing this? Mordain paused in the doorway, his back to them. Because I have served this kingdom for 30 years, Magister. I have seen 3 High Inquisitors before me, each bound by the same laws, the same duties, and I have watched as those laws, however well-intentioned, sometimes stand in the way of what must be done. He glanced back over his shoulder. I am not a young man. I have perhaps 10 years left before I pass the mantle to my successor, and I would prefer to pass it to someone in a kingdom that still exists. But if I use this magic in the field, then I will do my duty. Mordain's voice turned cold. Make no mistake, Magister Netherbane, if you take this power beyond these walls, if you wield it where others can see, where official reports must be filed and the king's law must be enforced, I will hunt you. I will bind you. I will bring you to justice. The law is clear, and I am sworn to uphold it. Even if it means the kingdom falls, even then. Mordain met his eyes, because some prices are too high to pay, even for survival. Some transformations cannot be undone. You would do well to remember that, Magister. The texts tell you that corruption is inevitable, but they don't tell you everything. They don't tell you what it feels like to watch yourself become something you once hunted. They don't tell you about the nightmares, the way innocent people will flinch from your presence, the knowledge that you've become the very thing you swore to fight. The words hung in the air, heavy with personal weight. Cassian realized with a start that Mordain wasn't speaking theoretically. You've used it, Cassian breathed. Anathema-class magic. I have done my duty, Mordain cut him off, as I will continue to do. Remember what I said, Magister. Research, study, theoretical practice in controlled environments. But the moment you step beyond these walls wielding that power, you become my enemy. And I am very good at my job. He left, the door closing softly behind him. Cassian and Elena stood in silence for a long moment. Finally, Elena released his hand, moving to the reading table where the forbidden texts still lay open. He's giving you a deadline, she said quietly. Learn everything you can here. Practice until you can control it, but don't use it in the field until you have no other choice. Or until the wards fall completely and the Voidweaver breaks free. Cassian joined her at the table. At which point, what choice will I have? None. Elena's voice was bleak. But at least you'll be ready. Cassian looked down at his hands, at the dark veins that marked him as something other than what he'd been. The void flame had left its signature in his flesh, in his spirit. Each time he used it, those marks would deepen. Each time he would lose a little more of himself. "I should start now," he said. "While I still remember why I'm doing this, while I can still feel the difference between necessary evil and evil for its own sake." Elena nodded. "Then let's go to the warded chamber. But first," she pulled him around to face her. "Promise me something. Promise me that if I tell you to stop, if I say you've gone too far, you'll listen, even if you don't want to. Even if the power is singing in your veins and you think you can handle more." Elena. "Promise me, Cassian." Her green eyes were fierce. "Because I meant what I said before. I'll be your anchor. I'll remind you who you are. But that only works if you let me. If you trust me to see what you can't see about yourself." He thought about refusing. Thought about arguing that he could maintain control, that he was strong enough. But the texts had been clear about one thing. The corrupted always believed they were still in control, right up until the moment they weren't. "I promise," he said. "If you tell me to stop, I'll stop." "Good." Elena managed a weak smile. "Now let's see what you can really do with this cursed magic, before the kingdom falls and we're all consumed by shadow." They gathered the texts and components, preparing to descend to the warded chamber below. As they worked, Cassian felt the ley lines pulsing beneath his feet, felt the distant hunger of the Voidweaver growing stronger with each passing hour. The entity was still sealed, still imprisoned, but it was waking, and it knew he was coming. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, he felt only grim determination. He would learn to wield this darkness. He would master the Anathema-class workings. And when the time came, when the wards finally failed and the Voidweaver broke free, he would face it with power enough to match its corruption. Even if it cost him everything he was. Even if, in the end, there was no difference between the weapon and the enemy. Far to the south, in the Shadowvale wastes, the Voidweaver stirred in its weakening prison. It had felt the High Inquisitor's words, tasted the complicated web of duty and compromise that now surrounded the young mage. Interesting. The humans were more pragmatic than it had anticipated. They were willing to forge their weapon after all, willing to sacrifice one of their own to darkness. The entity settled back into its patient waiting. Soon, the mage would practice. Would cast working after working, each one deepening the corruption, strengthening the soul bond. And with each casting, the Voidweaver would feel it, would taste it, would recognize more of itself in the young mage's growing power. Let him practice. Let him believe he was preparing to fight. When the time came, when Cassian Netherbane stood before the Voidweaver wielding the full might of Anathema-class magic, the entity would show him the truth, that there was no weapon, no tool, no magic that could stand against corruption without becoming corrupted itself. And then perhaps the young mage would understand, would see that he'd been walking toward his true destiny all along, not as the kingdom's savior, but as its doom.
Thanks for watching our stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic adventures. Thanks for watching our stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic adventures.